Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week, and if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. In today's tutorial, we're making a balloon sleeve shrug. At this point, we've made a handful of shrugs, but this time we're taking a different spin for even more added versatility. Speaking of, if you are all about making versatile pieces for your wardrobe, you are in the right place. We have hundreds of easy to follow modern crochet tutorials and patterns for all styles, with even more dropping twice weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now, it's time to get on with the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 300 grams of yarn. That's 675 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 5.5 and 6mm hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us if you'd rather have a craft room in your house or a studio that's away from your home. I don't like leaving my house, so I'd prefer to have one in home. We're using 3 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, and half double crochet. This tutorial is made for a size small. You can adjust for your size, and explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this shrug started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Then we're all going to grab our 5.5mm hook. We're all going to start by making a chain that starts 1 inch underneath our underarm down to about mid-chest. Now I just need an inch or 2 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 5. Now that we have our chain, we're all going to block off that last chain and do a chain 2. Now that chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then from here, yarn over, preparing for a half double crochet. Into that chain that we blocked off, or the 3rd chain from our hook, we are going to insert with a half double. So insert, yarn over, pull through, then yarn over, pull through 3. That's 1 half double crochet. Continue with 1 half double crochet into every chain, leaving the last one. We've made our way down with our row 1, leaving that last chain. Into that last chain, we're all going to do an increase of 3 half double crochets, so yarn over. Into that last chain with 1 half double, same last chain with a 2nd, and same last chain with a 3rd. Now we should all have 2 more stitches than chains that we made. Once we have our row 1 completed, we're all going to get started on our row 2, so chain 2 and flip. Since we are along the top of our piece, we're all going to start with an increase of 3 back loop half doubles. So starting with the yarn over, into that first stitch, inserting into that back loop or the loop that's furthest away from us, we're going to insert with 1 back loop half double, into that same stitch with a 2nd, same stitch with a 3rd. That is our increase. Then from here, continue with 1 back loop half into the rest of our stitches, so just to do the next, yarn over. Into that next stitch's back loop, insert with 1 back loop half, then continue with this, making our way all the way down. Our row 2 is now complete. From here, it is going to be a repeat of our 2 previous rows, all within the back loops now, so just to make sure we all have it down, we're all going to chain 2, flip our work. Put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last one. We've made our way down, our row 3 is nearly complete, we all should have left 1 additional stitch. Into that last stitch, an increase of 3 back loop halves, so yarn over, into that last stitch's back loop with 1, in with a 2nd, and in with a 3rd back loop half double crochet. And since we're at the end of our row 3, we might as well get started with our row 4 together, so chain 2, flip our work, start this row off with an increase of 3 back loop halves all into that first stitch. So there's 1, there's 2, there's 3, and continue with 1 back loop half into the rest of our stitches. So our first 4 rows are completed. From here, it is going to be a repeat of our 2 previous rows until we have a portion that can reach from mid-underarm, making sure that we're still keeping this tail end roughly 1 inch underneath our underarm, over to the front of our body, so roughly where a bra strap or a tank top strap would lay. Now, just as a really quick tip, this is actually going to be the back panel, but we do want to make sure that we're measuring it within the front panel, just to make sure that we get the proper width until we reach our bra strap, because we do need to make sure that this stays on our shoulder, otherwise it can very easily fall off. So once we have that completed, I will meet you guys back right after an odd number row, then I will meet you guys back so we can get started on the width of our back panel from there. We are back. My underarm portion is complete. I have a total of 7 rows. My width is just about 3 inches or 8 centimeters. And now what we're going to do from here, since we all should have ended along the top, is make a chain that reaches the top of our shoulder. Now we do want to make sure that we are still placing this tail end at about 1 inch underneath our underarm so that our armhole doesn't get too big or too small. Then make our chain. So I went ahead and already made my chain. I needed just about 3.5 inches or 9 centimeters, so I made a chain 15. Then from here, we're going to do a half double crochet row all the way back down. So once we have our chain, we're all going to block off that last chain and do a chain 2. That chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then from here, yarn over, preparing for a half double crochet. Into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, insert with a half double crochet. Then put 1 half double crochet into every chain. Then once we reach the body, 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, then I'll meet you back. So our first row for the width of our back panel is complete. Now all we're going to do from here is just more back loop half double crochet rows with no increases and no decreases for the width of our back. So all we're going to do is chain 2, flip our work, 1 back loop half into every stitch. At the end of that row, chain 2, flip our work, 1 back loop half into every stitch. We're going to continue to repeat those 2 previous rows until we have a portion that can reach across our back over to where our other bra strap would typically lay. Then I will meet you guys back along the bottom so we can finish up with our underarm together from there. So we are back. We have just completed the width of our back panel. Now I have a total of 28 rows. My total width is just about 10.5 inches or 26 centimeters. Now we're going to close off with our underarm portion. So first things first, we're all going to start by inserting our stitch marker into the same amount of chains that we made that led up to our shoulder. So for those of you that have my numbers, I made a chain 15. So along this side, from the top, I inserted my stitch marker into my 15th stitch. Since we should all be along the bottom, we're all going to chain 2, flip our work, put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving 3 stitches right before our stitch marker. We've just made our way up with our first underarm row. We left the last 3 stitches right before our stitch marker. Now we're all going to do a decrease of 3 back loop half doubles. So what we're going to do is yarn over into that third to last back loop, pull through, second to last, pull through, and last, pull through for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook. From here, yarn over, pull through all 5 loops, and now our first underarm row is complete. Our following row is going to start with a decrease of 3 back loop half doubles as well, so chain 2 and flip. Now just to do our decrease together once more, yarn over. Into that first stitch's back loop, pull through, into the next, pull through, next, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 5. Then from here, continue with 1 back loop half double crochet into the rest of our stitches. Our second underarm row is complete. From here, we're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows for the same amount of rows that we have for our first underarm portion. So just as a refresher, since we're along the bottom, chain 2, flip our work, 1 back loop half into every stitch with a decrease of 3 back loop halves into the last 3 stitches. Then start off our following row with a decrease of 3 back loop halves, 1 back loop half into the rest of our stitches. Then I will meet you all back once we have this portion completed with a chain up of 1 and cut right after that last row. We are back. The entirety of my back panel is now complete. My total width is now 16.5 inches or 42 centimeters. Now from here, we're going to get started on the front panel. So right before we get started on the front panel, it will be worked straight off of the back panel so we don't have to seam it up. What we're going to do is insert a stitch marker into that last underarm row that we have just so we know where the back panel is going to start. Then we're going to insert our hook into the bottom corner stitch of the back panel. Then we're going to pull through and start with a chain 2. That chain 2 doesn't actually count as a stitch, we just want the height. But what we're going to do is start with a decrease of 3 half double crochets. So yarn over into that first stitch, we're going to insert, pull through, next stitch, pull through, next stitch, pull through for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook. Then yarn over, pull through all 5 of the loops. Then put 1 half double crochet into every stitch until we have 1 stitch left. And for those of you that have my numbers, we're just going to do 1 half double crochet because then we just have 1 stitch left. And into that last stitch, we're all going to do an increase of 3 half double crochets. So yarn over into that last stitch with 1, same last stitch with a second, same last stitch with a third. Now this first underarm row for our front panel is complete. We do want to make sure that we're inserting a stitch marker into the top of this row just so we know where the front panel starts. And now we're going to get started on our row 2, so chain 2 and flip. Now when it comes to doing the front panel, we're always going to be doing an increase of 3 back loop halves along the top and a decrease of 3 back loop halves along the bottom. So to get that started, since we're starting our row 2, into this first stitch's back loop, insert with an increase of 3 back loop half doubles. Then when we have our increase, 1 back loop half into every stitch, leaving the last 3 stitches. When we have these 3 stitches left, a decrease of 3. So yarn over into that third to last, pull through, second to last, pull through, last, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 5. Our row 2 is complete. Let's just do our row 3 as well, so chain 2 and flip. Starting this row off with a decrease of 3 back loop halves. So yarn over, insert, pull through, next, pull through, next, pull through, yarn over, pull through 5. 1 back loop half into every stitch, leaving the last one. Then into that last one, an increase of 3 back loop halves. Now our first 3 rows for our front panel are complete. From here, we're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we have the same amount of underarm rows as the back panel. Once we do, I will meet you guys back so you can make a chain that reaches up to our shoulder. So we are back. We have just completed the tiny little front panel portion that we are going to have. I have the same amount of rows as the back panel's underarm. We all should have ended along the top, and what we're going to do from here is make a chain for the same amount of chains that we made or for the same amount of stitches that we skipped for the back panel, depending on what side you're looking at. It should be the same for both sides. So I made a chain or skipped 15 stitches. So along this side, I made a chain 15. Once we have our chain, all we're going to do is slip stitch it into the top corner stitch of the back panel and do a chain up 1 and cut. So take your chain, insert it into the top corner stitch of the back panel, yarn over, pull through everything, do a chain up 1 and cut. So we are back and one side of our tiny little front panel is complete. Now we're going to repeat everything we did here on the other side. So just insert your hook into the bottom corner stitch of the back panel. We're going to repeat the same underarms, the same chain, and then slip stitch it into the top corner stitch of the back panel. When we have that completed, I will meet you back. So we are back. We have just completed both of our tiny little front panels. Now we're going to get started on the sleeve. So first things first, we're all going to start by inserting our 5.5mm hook into the space that we have in between our 2 stitch markers. Then what we're going to do, working our way up our underarm portion, is alternate between 1 to 2 single crochet into every side row. So all I'm going to do is pull my working yarn through and start with a chain 1. Then, finding my first side row right here, I'm going to find that top loop and insert with just 1 single crochet. Into my following top loop, I'm going to insert into there with 2. So there is 1, same top loop with a second, and that's it. We're going to continue to alternate between 1 to 2 single crochet into every side row, then make your way up our shoulder portion. Once we made our way up to where we did our chain up of 1 and cut, so our tail end, I will meet you guys back. So we've just made our way up one of our panels. Now into the last stitch that we have on this side of our panel, we're going to be inserting a stitch marker, and that's going to be one of our middle stitches. Then working our way down the other side, we're going to continue with 1 single crochet into every stitch. Then into our side rows, alternate between 1 to 2 single crochet into every side row. But into the first stitch on the other panel that we have, we're going to insert another stitch marker, so we have our 2 middle stitches. So for me, just into that first stitch on the other side of our tail end, I'm going to insert with 1 single crochet and insert a stitch marker into there. From here, we're just going to continue on with our single crochet row. Once we made our way all the way down, slip stitch into that chain space. And we do want to make sure that we have the same amount of stitches on both sides of our stitch marker. Then I'll meet you back. So we are back and our single crochet row is complete. Now from here, we're going to get started on the length of our sleeve. As you guys can see, I have already made the chain the length that I need my sleeve to be. But before we do that, we are going to need to switch out to our 6mm hook just to give us a little bit more width. Then from there, we're going to make a chain the length that we'd like for the sleeve to be. It can either be a long sleeve or short sleeve, that's up to you. I'd like for mine to be a long sleeve, so I went ahead and made a chain of 60, and that's 16 inches or 41 centimeters. Once we have our chain, we're all going to chain 2. That chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch. That's our turning chain. We're all going to yarn over, and into that chain that we blocked off, or the third chain from our hook, we're going to insert with a half double crochet. From here, continue with 1 half double crochet into every chain, leaving the last one. We made our way down with our row 1, leaving that last chain. Now into that last chain, we're all going to do an increase of 2 half double crochets. So yarn over, into that last chain with 1, same last chain with a second. Then we're going to connect it into the base, so just finding that next available stitch into the base, we're going to insert with a slip stitch. Now that slip stitch doesn't actually count as a stitch, that's just to connect. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, and flip our work. Then into the first stitch from our previous row, start with an increase of 2 back loop halves. So yarn over, into that first stitch's back loop, insert with 1, same first stitch's back loop, insert with a second, making sure that we're not working into any of those slip stitches into the base. Then from here, continue with 1 back loop half into every stitch. At the end of the row, chain 2, flip our work, and put 1 back loop half into every stitch again, leaving that last stitch, and I'll meet you back at the end of our row 3. So we are back. We are nearly complete with our first 3 rows. Now we're just going to connect it into the base together. And we're all going to start with our increase of 2 back loop halves all into that same back loop. Now we've just completed our increase. Now we're going to connect it into the base, and it will be done the same way as our previous row. So finding that next available stitch into the base, insert with a slip stitch. That slip stitch doesn't actually count as a stitch. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base. Still doesn't count as a stitch. Flip our work and repeat. From here, we're just going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we're worked into our first stitch marker stitch. Then I'll meet you back to make our way down with a decreased side. We are back, and I've just made my way all the way up with the first half of my sleeve. I am worked into my stitch marker stitch. Now what we're going to do from here is basically repeat everything we did here, but instead of increases, we're going to be doing decreases. So for those of you that have ended along the base like me, all we're going to do is slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, which should be our next stitch marker stitch, flip our work. For those of you that have ended along the outer edge, chain 2, flip, put 1 back loop half into every stitch, leaving the last 2 stitches. Then I will meet you guys back after the following clip. Now I have slip stitched into that following stitch into the base, which was my following stitch marker stitch. I did flip my work, and now we're going to get started on the following row, which is going to start with a decrease of 2 back loop halves. So yarn over, into that first stitch's back loop, pull through. Next stitch's back loop, pull through. Yarn over, pull through 4, then continue with 1 back loop half into the rest of our stitches. At the end of the row, chain 2, flip our work, put 1 back loop half into every stitch, leaving the last 2 stitches. Then I will meet everyone back, then we can do that decrease together as well. So we are back. We have made our way all the way down with our back loop half doubles, leaving the last 2 stitches. Now to do this row, we're going to yarn over. Into that second to last back loop, we're going to insert, pull through. Into that last back loop, also insert, pull through for 4 loops on our hook. Yarn over, pull through 4, then connect it into the base the same way that we've been doing. So just into that following stitch, insert with a slip stitch to connect. That slip stitch doesn't actually count as a stitch. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base. Still doesn't count as a stitch. Flip our work. Start the following row off with a decrease of 2 back loop half doubles with 1 back loop half into the rest of our stitches. Then from here, just continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, I'll meet you back so we can seam it all up together. So we are back, and we have just finished making our way down with the decreased side of our sleeve. Now from here, since we don't have any more stitches left to work into the base, we're now going to seam it up, and this is going to be a single crochet seam. So we're all going to start by making sure the work is slipped wrong side out so that our seam for this portion can be along the inside. Then we're going to insert our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. We're going to pull through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. Now what we're going to do is just single crochet into both the front and the back panel. So finding that first available stitch into the front panel, insert. First stitch into the back panel, insert, and single crochet. Let's do that again. Next stitch into the front panel, insert. Next stitch into the back panel, insert, single crochet, and just continue on with this till we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up 1 and cut, then I'll meet you back. So now that we have just finished seaming up our sleeve, now we're going to get started on our cuff. So making sure that our work is flipped right side out, we're going to insert our same 6mm hook into any one of the side rows that we have along the bottom of our sleeve. Then we're going to pull our working yarn through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And start with 1 single crochet into every other side row. So finding our first side row, which is the same one that my chain 1 is in, start with 1 single crochet. You're going to skip over that following row into the next with another single crochet. Continue on with this, making our way all the way around, then slip stitch into that chain space. So now that we've made our way all the way around with our single crochet row and slip stitch into that chain space, we're now all going to make a chain the length that we'd like for our cuff to be. Now I'd like for my cuff to be just about 3 inches or 8 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 15. Now that we have our chain, we're all going to get started on our first row, which is a slip stitch row. Start by blocking out that last chain and chain 1. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then into that chain that we blocked off with the second chain from our hook, we're going to insert with a slip stitch. So insert, yarn over, and gently pull through both loops on our hook. We want to make sure that we're not tugging too tightly, otherwise the following row will be too tight to work into. Let's do that again. Into that next chain, insert, yarn over, gently pull through both. We're going to continue this, making our way all the way down our chain. Now that we put 1 slip stitch into every chain, we're now going to slip stitch it into the base. So just like how we did for our sleeve, we're going to find that next available stitch into the base and insert with a slip stitch. Now that slip stitch doesn't actually count as a stitch, that's just to connect. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next available stitch into the base. Still doesn't count as a stitch, flip our work. And now we're going to be putting 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So finding that first stitch from our previous row, not working into any of those slip stitches into the base, we're going to insert in through that back loop, yarn over, and gently pull through both loops on our hook. Then from here, continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. At the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work, put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch again, and I'll meet you back at the end of our row 3. We are back and our first 3 rows are completed. Now we're going to connect it into the base. So as a refresher, finding that next available stitch into the base, insert with a slip stitch, doesn't count as a stitch. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. From here, continue to repeat our 2 previous rows, making our way all the way around. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, I'll meet you guys back so we can seam it all together. So we are back. We've made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch rows. Now what we're going to do from here is seam it up using an outside loop slip stitch seam. So we're going to start by making sure that our work is slipped right side out, right side up. Then we're going to insert our hook into that first available stitch into the front panel, making sure it's only in through that front loop. Then also into that next available stitch into the back panel, making sure it's only in through that back loop. Then when we have these 3 loops on our hook, yarn over and pull through all 3. Let's do this again. Next stitch into the front panel, insert only in through that front loop. Next stitch into the back panel, insert only in through that back loop. Then yarn over, pull through all 3, and that's it. Continue on with this till we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut and repeat on the other side. So now that we are back, we're now going to single crochet along the entirety of our piece just to clean it up. So first things first, we're all going to insert our 6mm hook into any one of the side rows that we have along the top of our back panel. Then working into the back panel, we're going to alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row. So we're going to pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure. Into this first side row, I'm going to insert, starting with just 1 single crochet. Into my following side row, I'm going to insert into there with 2. So there's 1, there's 2, and we're going to continue on with this, making our way all the way across. Then once we reach the front panel, we're going to be putting 1 single crochet into every stitch. Then once we reach our few underarm rows for the front panel, I will meet you guys back to show you what we're going to do into there. So we've made our way across the top of our back with our singles and also made our way down with 1 single crochet into every stitch. Now we're going to work into the few rows that we have for the front panel. So once we've made our way down our chain, we should have some regular stitches to work into. So put 1 single crochet into each of those. So we just made our way down with 1 single crochet into every stitch. Now working into the side rows within the bottom of the front panel only, 2 single crochets into each of those. So just to do the first one together, finding our first side row, this is mine right here. I'm going to find that top loop and insert with 2 singles. So there's 1, there's 2. This is my following side row. I'm going to find that top loop and insert with 2 as well. So there's 1, same top loop with 2. We're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more front panel rows left to work into. We've just made our way down with our single crochets down our front panel. Now we're going to be working into the back. Now working into the back panel, alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row, same way that we did for the top of our back panel. Then once we reach the front panel on the other side, 2 single crochets into each of those side rows, 1 single crochet into every stitch, and 1 single crochet into every stitch, making our way back up. Once we made our way all the way around, slip stitch into that chain space, then I'll meet you back. We've made our way all the way around with our single crochet row. We did do a chain up, a one, and cut, and now we are all done. The last thing I have to do is just weave in all of our ends. And there you have it. Hope y'all enjoyed the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch y'all the next one. Bye!